Soulmates, welcome to your Wednesday. Plenty to talk about. We're following the continued increase in book bans across the nation and the Surgeon General, who is accused of altering his state's COVID-19 data. We want to welcome you to FOXSOUL's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. Plus, Jalen Rose is firing back following comments made about Black Lives Matter. And the New Orleans high school senior who's breaking records are the stories that impact our people.
That's right. We're bringing you our news, our voice, and our views and our voice. So let's get into our big conversation for today. It takes us to Jackson, Mississippi, where a woman is suing the state capitol police, accusing officers of using excessive force when she was shot in the arm while lying in her bed. The incident occurred when an officer fired at a man fleeing a stolen car into Latasha Smith's apartment complex. She survived, but was traumatized and unable to work. The lawsuit claims poor officer training and a disregard for human life that led to that shooting. Some argue that the Capitol Police are necessary to combat violent crime, but others say officers haven't been properly trained for the job. This is the second lawsuit against the police in a week.
The Run with Maud 5K Run Walk will take place on May 6th at Centennial Olympic Park to celebrate the life of Amaud Arbery and raise funds for his foundation. Arbery was shot and killed in 2020 while out for a run. The Run Walk aims to raise awareness of running's benefits for mental and physical health and provide mental health resources for Black boys. The Atlanta Track Club will organize the event. It will be part of a day-long celebration of running, with all proceeds benefiting the Amaud Arbery Foundation. Registration is now open.
And joining us now is Wanda Cooper Jones, mother of Amaud Arbery. We want to thank you for your time today and welcome to Black Report.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Justice is still being sought for your son. Former District Attorney Jackie Johnson has been charged for interfering on behalf of your son's killers in the investigation. Can you give us an update as to where does her case stand?
I was told by the state a couple of weeks ago that the lead attorney for Ms. Johnson was actually in a trial here in Atlanta. So we won't be moving forward with her case until that case is over. So I'm hoping that case will be soon open. That case will be soon over. We can have her in court as well.
Indeed. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the Run with Maud, the 5K run. It's coming up next month. Why did you decide to do a run, yet another run in his honor? There are plenty that have been out there. Talk a little bit about this one in particular.
Sure, thank you. I would have turned 29 years old on May 8th, and I decided the day of May 6th would be like a celebration for Amaud's birthday as well. And also, I wanted people to never forget that Amaud Arbery was just simply out on a run that Sunday afternoon, and his life was taken away. I think that we need to, I want his name to be called forever. I mean, for starters. And all the monies raised would go back into the community, servicing our Black boys in mental and physical wellness.
And can you tell us a little bit more as to, when is it, and where does it take place, and how can folks get involved?
Sure. The run is going to take place in Centennial Park in Atlanta, Georgia. We're going to start at 8 o'clock a.m. You can register, go online to the AmaudArberyFoundation.org and register. There's a $35 registration fee, and if you want an inaugural shirt, you can purchase that in the amount of $20.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the Arbery Foundation, the platform, and the message that you continue and hope to continue to push.
Sure. As we all know, when Amaud was killed, he was having some mental challenges. I want any Black boy who looks like Amaud who are facing those type challenges to have the resources to help in those areas.
Ms. Jones, you recently wanted to meet with Ralph Yarl's family. Can you tell us why, and has that meeting happened, or is it about to happen?
Sure. I talked to the mother of baby Ralph about, I think it was last week, and she assured me that Ralph is doing better, and she was doing good as well. I thought it was very important because when tragedy hits home, I mean, mothers who have never been through this fight before are facing this type of tragedy. I think it's very important for them to know that they're not in this fight alone, And I just wanted to reach out and give her my sincere condolences that she was facing those challenges.
Yeah, Ms. Cooper-Jones, first of all, it's good to see your face. I was in the area when this tragic incident occurred, a couple of counties over in Richmond. So, of course, you know, it wasn't as heavy for me as a journalist as it is for you as a mom, but we definitely felt it. It was very heavy. I even interviewed some young black men who, like Amaud, were runners and were afraid to run, were very emotional about it. How do you keep, you know, how do you stay inspired? How do you stay encouraged? And the strength, where do you draw from?
Sure. I just want to add, I thought I knew your face because when the tragedy happened, I moved back to Waynesboro and I watched it on the local news a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's so good to see you.
You too.
I forgot the question now, I'm sorry.
Just the strength, where do you draw from, the encouragement, you know, and how you keep going?
Basically, starting the foundation is lets me know that Amaud's legacy will never end. And knowing that the work that we're going to do is going to impact black boys in the community, that's actually my strength there.
Indeed, indeed.
And speaking of black boys, I mean, you know, it's never ending. The headlines in the news of unarmed black men, you know, being shot and killed. You know, what do you make of this moment? You know, coming off of the Ralph Yarl, you know, shooting in Kansas City. What do you make of this moment, and what's your message to our audience and to the nation to keep this from happening ever again?
Well, actually, I mean, it happens too much, too soon, always. And then when Baby Ralph was shot, that there wasn't the proper arrest done at the time that it was done, like in Amaud's case. I would say that anytime that something happens, we need to stay on top of it. And when we need arrests, we need to fight until those arrests are done.
Yeah. Before we let you go, Ms. Cooper-Jones, one more time, how we can be involved in the Amaud 5K race and how we can link with your with the foundation. That information.
Sure. That you can visit the web at the AmaudArberyFoundation.org. There's a registration link on that page, and also you can also check out the page to find out the wonderful that we're doing in the community.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for your time today. We love you. We appreciate you. And thank you for continuing to remind us to live in your son's legacy. And we'll definitely have to have you back soon just to check in and see how you're doing.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on here. A United Nations panel is touring the U.S. for 2 weeks to focus on racial justice, law enforcement, and policing. The expert mechanism to advance racial justice and equality in the context of law enforcement panel, that's a lot, will check if laws and practices for law enforcement align with international human rights standards. Now, they will visit D.C., Atlanta, L.A., Chicago, Minneapolis, and New York to combat racism, ensure accountability, and offer recommendations. A report will be presented to the UN Human Rights Council a little bit later on this year.
The writers' organization PEN America reported that book bans in the U.S. public schools had increased by 28% in the first half of the 2022-2023 academic year. It described a, quote, relentless conservative crusade to constrict children's freedom to read. PEN America recorded over 4,000 instances of banned books since July 2021, including over 1,400 individual books, bans affecting nearly 1,000 unique titles. 30% of banned books are about race. They're about racism, characters of color, while 26% have LGBTQ characters or themes. 7 Texas and 13 Florida districts were responsible for a significant number of book bans, and the rise is linked to censorship legislation in the states. You
know, as this continues, it kind of takes me back, you know, to the idea of tapping into a little bit of retro spectrum. You remember the Reading Rainbow, LeVar Burton. He hosted that thing from like the mid 80s all the way up until 06. He won Emmys, he won a Peabody Award. He produced that thing and really put his heart into it. And it was all to get us, you know, black kids in particular, to read. And I think as this movement to ban these type of books, to ban this information and to erase it all, I think we need to tap into programs similar to Reading Rainbow and continue to formulate programs like this that can combat what is going on. Because, you know, if I'm not mistaken, you can gather some kids together and private and read these books and disseminate this information and tell the narratives. So again, I feel like we're going to just have to own it and take the teaching of our history into our own hands and still fight for what should be a part of American history. But in the meeting in between, what brings to mind is something like the Reading Rainbow, where there's an actual program and something out there for kids to tap into and learn while this is ongoing.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that there is a connection between these book bans and the climate that we're creating in our communities that's enabling violence to take place.
Right.
It's enabling and quite frankly putting in danger a lot of our young people. And so we'll continue to keep our eye on these, but these book bans are super scary.
All righty, President Biden endorses, President Obama rather, endorses President Biden's re-election bid, saying, quote, "Let's get to work." Obama tweets pride in Biden's accomplishments, stating he's delivered for the American people and can continue if re-elected. Biden officially declared his candidacy for re-election, citing his accomplishments and the need to preserve American freedoms. However, there are some voters that have expressed concern about President Biden's age, leading some to doubt his ability to serve another 4 years. Now, despite this, only marginal opposition for the Democratic nomination currently challenges Biden, including self-help author Marianne Williamson and environmental lawyer Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Well, you know the Obamas, both President Obama, former President Obama, and Michelle Obama, our forever First Lady, are going to play an outsized role in this re-election campaign, in part because they're so popular. But let's also not give short shrift to Vice President Harris, who's already, been having a pretty strong year. Remember, right after the Nashville protest, where the Tennessee Three were expelled, Vice President Harris was right there on the ground the very next day, right? And she's been talking a lot about women's reproductive rights. And so, I think you're seeing sort of a dream team hopefully being assembled to rally Democratic black voters to pull Biden over the finish line.
And just a side note, a connection to Marianne Williamson, who is going, to run. She was my spiritual leader. There was a church here locally called Church of the Day. Myself, Kim, the R&B singer Kim, Thornetta Davis, Detroit's Queen of the Blues. We all were a part of this church. So, some years later to see her jump into that realm was a bit surprising for me. I do appreciate a lot of her ideology and doctrine. I don't know if it's fitting for what we need in D.C., but, it shows that, folks who feel strong about this thing and have the support and the money, you could throw your hat in to be the president of the United States of America. So it's just an interesting tap into that particular story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Michael Jackson's mother, Katherine Jackson, will testify in court as she battles against the late singer's estate. The executors of the estate, John Branca and John McClain, secured a deal believed to be linked to the reported $800 million sale of half of Jackson's music catalog. The Jackson matriarch objected to the deal 3 months later, and Michael's siblings, Randy and Rebe, viewed confidential documents related to the sale. The estate's beneficiaries are Jackson's 3 children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, with the will also providing for Katherine for the rest of her life.
Let me tell you something. Mother Jackson probably has plenty more secrets to reveal and dig up if the case be. I've always, for me, prayed and hoped for the best for the Jackson family. I know fame and money does a lot, evil, but for them to be able to stay as a unit and stay unified, especially after the tragic loss, of Michael. I know, according to the docuseries that we've seen lately, Janet and Randy seem to have a pretty solid relationship. It seems to be up and down with the other siblings, but when mother speaks, Folks will listen. I think it appears as though to me that that's the one person that Michael really, really trusted was Mama, and that's the one who seems to have like some of the power and some of the secrets.
Yeah, and it's also important to note that the Jackson estate was like $400 million in debt when these two executors of the estate took over. They have pulled the estate out of debt. This is an $800 million deal that they're looking at. And so, you know, matriarch Jackson, Mama Jackson, may not be looking at the business case that they're making. She may have, you know, other feelings about the deal. The idea of selling, you know, half of his music catalog, I think, you know, most of us who read that sort of had a reaction like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? But you know, they've been pretty business savvy thus far, and so we'll see where this case goes.
Indeed. All right, coming up, Lizzo is taking her protest to the stage.
That's right. We'll tell you about what she's doing to combat the drag ban in Tennessee. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report.
And we welcome you back to Fox Soul's Black Report. All eyes on Florida. They've been on Florida.
They stay on Florida.
This time, as the Surgeon General is in hot water, but this time it's not for his comments. Dr. Joseph Ladapo is accused of altering data-related COVID-19 for his own agenda.
That's right. Sources reported this week that he altered a state analysis last year to suggest that men between 18 and 39 were at high risk of heart illness from 2 COVID-19 vaccines that use mRNA technology. This type of tech instructs cells in the body to make specific proteins to fight certain diseases and infections. Ladapo is an appointee of Governor DeSantis. Shame on him.
Yeah, it's definitely not a good look. I'm not sure if Governor DeSantis has responded to what has taken place here, but it's definitely not a good look, especially after you know, they put COVID and the whole vaccination piece, they put it under fire, you know, in Florida. This was, their argument, and so it looks like in order to support some of those crazy arguments that went against science, if you will, that some of these facts have been altered down there in Florida to better support what they felt about the pandemic and about COVID-19 versus what was being put out there and how we were being educated by way of Fauci and DC, who they of course disagreed with.
And we know how much message carriers matter, particularly in the Black community, particularly during some of the darkest days of the pandemic. You know, my mother grew up in the Tampa Bay area. We have relatives that died of COVID. And, you know, it makes me wonder, you know, maybe if they were getting better information, you know, from people that are supposed to take a Hippocratic oath, you know, to do no harm, right? Well, what he did, I think, created harm because it created confusion. It created misinformation. And so I say shame on him.
Yeah, and still to this day, I've kind of reduced it down to, look, it's something that we're going to have to unfortunately live with. Let me take advantage of all the vaccinations that are available and will be available. With that, you'll probably have some congestion, stuffy nose, a little tired, maybe run a fever. You work through that cycle, you mask up, you stay away from folks, and then you move on with your life. That's the best I can do with all of that information from both sides that was so confusing. Now that we're on the other side of the pandemic, that's my takeaway. That's my takeaway. It's something we're going to have to live with, and you know, you take some steps to keep yourself safe and the ones you are around and love the most.
We just need people to stop lying about it and stop using it for political gain.
Indeed. All right, let's go to Alabama, where Governor Kay Ivey forced out the state's early childhood education secretary, a lady by the name of Barbara Cooper, over the use of a teacher training book that included woke concepts. Now, the book covers racism and inclusion, but Ivey argued it had no place in Alabama classrooms. Ivey instructed Cooper to discontinue the book, and she resigned. The National Association for the Education of Young Children published the book to support teachers. Educators criticized the move for, quote, whitewashing American history. Here's this conversation yet again, the court alive.
Yeah, and are we surprised that it's coming out of Alabama?
And Governor Kay Ivey? No.
And you know,
No.
and the book in question is a book that is in its 4th edition, right? So you didn't have anything to say about the first edition,
when it came
the second
past your
edition,
desk.
the 3rd edition, but all of a sudden, in the 4th edition, oh wait a minute, you know, there's stuff there that experts say isn't really there. So what's really going on? I mean, we were just talking about in Florida, the doctor that, you know, had fudged information about COVID-19 seemingly for political gain. Well, it looks like in neighboring Alabama, this governor, you know, seems to be playing loose with the facts.
And, you know, if this book is legit and, you know, take the fight about it, you know, over here, but let's, as a culture, as a community, let's create some safe spaces where we can tap into this book and discuss it and read over it and study it with our children. You know, that's, to me, that's the answer right now as we continue, you know, to fight, you know, in the House and in the Senate and wherever else we fight in the school board rooms and meetings to get our history told and out there like everyone else's is.
And it's just another reminder, we got to tap in. We got to tap into what's happening in our school boards. We got to tap into the ballot box because there's so much at stake, not just for our kids, but our history.
Speaking of tapping in.
Yeah,
man.
Lizzo is showing her solidarity with the drag community. The Grammy singer protested one of Tennessee's latest laws by bringing out 20 drag queens on stage during her concert in Knoxville. Lizzo thanking each performer by name on her Instagram account, where she has, get this, more than 13 million followers.
She was ready for Tennessee, honey. She had on combat boots, and you see here the queens here dressed in all the brigale, if you will, all the pageantry of it all to really
contoured.
Yeah, to really combat this Tennessee law that, you know, prohibits performance in public places. This law even goes as far to make it a violation or to be against the law to wear certain clothing while performing. You can't do tank tops, you can't do mini skirts. I mean, this law really digs deep, and I'm just saying to myself, listen, can you be just as adamant about keeping our babies safe in school, keeping me safe when I go to the grocery store,
banning
or the
assault
mall,
weapons? How
or
about
the
that?
Movies? Can we take some of that effort and as detailed as that ban is, and put that towards keeping America safe?
That's right. That's right.
That's my thought on that.
And hat tip to Lizzo. This is a powerful demonstration of allyship, right? Because you know, she risked violating the law. We know that a court has sort of put a stay on this and suspects that the law is unconstitutional in the first place. But still, she's going out there and she's taking a risk. And we love to see artists, you know, sort of operating in the same vein as the great Harry Belafonte. You got to get out there, use your platform for good to say something of consequence, and it looks like that's what she's doing.
Fearlessness. Gotta love it. All right. According to a recent study, less than half of Black Gen Xers, Gen Xers, I'm sorry, born from 1965 to 1980, so we're talking Gen X here, believe they won't be able to retire by the age of 70. The study shows only 10% of Black Gen Xers have over $500,000 in retirement savings. 43% worry they'll outlive their retirement savings, and 41% are concerned about housing affordability. Cleaver Real Estate suggests starting retirement savings now and seeking financial advice. They also recommend advocating for a more robust retirement program for American workers. And Nicola, as a Gen Xer, I was, you know, born vintage 1971. I see the worry. You know, I see the concern. I will be honest. It was, you know, when I said, hey, I'm ready to be somebody's wife, I had to check that thing because, you know, it's not about marrying for money, but you want to feel the increase. If not, I can continue to, you know, rob Peter and pay Paul as a single woman. But it is something to think about. Even life insurance at 52, you know, my life insurance, even though I drew, you know, I started one much earlier in life. But right now, if I were to start a life insurance policy, it's about $1 million a month at 52 years old because they're thinking, according to statistics, especially with Black folks, we don't live too long, and so they're gonna make you pay up. So it's a tough decision, but I know folks, you know, in my age group who probably will have to work well beyond age 70.
And I'm what people call a geriatric millennial, an older millennial,
Sure.
And so, I certainly can relate to this. I have friends that can relate to this. The cost of things are pretty high, right? And so, you're supposed to save like 10% of your income, every year just towards retirement. That's not emergency fund. That's just towards retirement. So, people are still, trying to manage inflation. People are still trying to make ends meet. And so, that's easier said than done. But you know what? That side hustle that might have been a nice to have, that might just be a must have.
That different avenues of income. Nowadays it's almost a must and mandatory, or to have a cushion or an emergency fund, which is even hard to keep because it's an emergency every day when a carton of eggs costs, $25. So it's even tough to save. So I hear the stats, I hear the advice, I hear the research, but on a day-to-day, it's tough to save a little bit.
It's also going to be interesting to see whether or not the rate of folks that marry, whether or not that's going to increase, right? Pooling resources together as a couple, because we see certainly with millennials that the rate at which people marry and are building families has decreased compared to Generation X. And so I don't know if that trend is going to hold, and if so, how long will it hold?
Yeah, very interesting discussion. All right.
Well, still ahead, it's a family reunion unlike any other.
Oh yes, we'll tell you all about the meeting between the descendants of, check it out, Robert Lee, and the descendants of those he enslaved. Very interesting here. It's all coming up, soulmates. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report.
Welcome back to Fox Soul's Black Report. Well, 2 black pastors finally received justice and acknowledgement.
The Yale Board of Trustees has voted to give 2 posthumous degrees to 2 black theology students who attended Yale University back in the 19th century. Reverend James W.C. Pennington and Reverend Alexander Crummell, seen here, faced several injustices during their time at Yale, university officials said. Now, Pennington was also the first black student to attend Yale University. The 2 men were not allowed to formally register for classes or matriculate for a degree because of their race.
That's right. They did not have access to library resources and were not allowed to participate in classroom discussions due to racism. Despite the injustices they faced, Pennington and Crummell became highly regarded pastors and Pan-African scholars in their lifetimes. They were also both leaders in the abolitionist movement.
Well, big ups to those who did the research and found these 2 men, and I'm sure there's plenty more who face these kind of discriminations as they tried to press on and press through and get their education at Yale. And back then, Yale was still Yale. And so big ups to those who kind of unearthed this story and now are giving them their just due. I hope that movement and that energy continues. Keep that same energy, and let's continue to unearth some, stories similar and other people who are deserving of such an honor as well. It's too late, but it's never too late. How about that?
Yeah, and to your point, I hope that these hidden figures become not so hidden at all. I mean, this is the very history that we are fighting for our young people to know about, right? This was one of the original We Shall Overcome stories. I mean, think about it. Like, how do you go to, one of the most celebrated universities in the United States, and you can't even go into the library to check out a book?
But still persevered.
Right? But you still persevere, and you still go on to matriculate and to do good in the world, right? With a country that didn't do good by you, right? That's what we're made of.
Yeah, and we know that Yale and that whole Ivy League, the cream of the crop, but, there are some other amazing university and colleges where I'm sure that they have plenty of stories like this if those folks there want to take the time to dig a little deep and find them. So very sure.
That's right.
All right. Confederate General Robert E. Lee's name continues to be removed. This time, it's Fort Lee, Virginia, a military base, which as of yesterday was named after the Confederate general. The fort now honors Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. The U.S. Army said in a statement, a redesignation ceremony is planned for the 27th of this month, honoring the 2 black officers who officials said excelled in the field of sustainment and made significant marks in the U.S. Army and its history.
I mean, wow. I mean, what a tall honor. And I'm just glad that he lived long enough to be able to see this.
Yeah.
You know, at 94, you know, one of the only living people, you know, in the Army to be able to witness that sort of honor. And we know this doesn't come easy, and especially in this current political climate, you know, where the idea of removing Confederate monuments and removing the names of Confederate generals off of various, you know, government properties across the country. That this was no easy thing, and so I really am glad that he had a chance to see it.
And you know, these folks these monuments were erected and named after, you know, that's what that was. But now that we've moved into a space, and especially a thinking where, you know, we're being governed by diversity, it is just amazing how many choices over the years, over the decades, people have had to choose from as far as people of color, people who are different. You know, you could have had some of these monuments named after some of these very people if, you know, you at some point started to lead with an all-inclusive attitude. We're talking about the military, who is kind of separate and set aside, and you would think that they would want to honor everybody regardless of the color, but even in their past, they kind of stuck to folks who kind of represented what they represented, which is why a lot of those monuments and name changes are taking place now. So it's evident that there are plenty of folks out there, as far as diversity is concerned, who deserve that kind of honor and recognition.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Robert E. Lee, his black and white descendants recently met for a reunion at the Arlington House in Virginia. Sources reported that descendants of Lee met with the descendants of people he once enslaved. This was the first time some of them have met in person, as they have had conversations virtually, hoping to understand the racial divide with something called Family Circle. The celebration drew a crowd of about 100 people. Stephen Hammond, the organizer and the descendant of a Lee family slave, said that this has been a lifelong goal of his. It's important that we get to know one another because our ancestors existed in this space together, he stated.
And I agree with that. And so, you know, for the optics of it all, yes, let's have a kumbaya moment. It's 2023. I remember the captain of one of the last slave ships to enter into the Mobile area, and the descendants of, you know, the slaves who were on that ship, they are either recently got together or they're trying to get together as well. So yes, I think have these meetings and these kumbaya moments, but maybe, you know, in secret or in the back room or behind the cameras, let's sit down and really talk about, you know, how this really feels. Let's sit down and talk about how, you know, slavery has impacted blacks for generations to generation, and how slavery has impacted, you know, white folks or the owners on the other side of that in a very different way for generations to we're talking about the setup here. So I think this is great, but let's pull back, you know, and let's really get to, even if it gets a little emotional and heavy and sticky, let's really talk about, you know, how we really feel. I think this is a great moment to do that.
Yeah, and speaking of this moment, I mean, there's been so much afoot with regard to reparations. We've had Hariva Martin on the show just yesterday talking about an effort in Palm Springs. Well, you know, we're having that conversation. We can have that conversation without also having a conversation about reconciliation, right? And what does that look like? What does restorative justice look like? And so I hope that both the black and white families, the descendants of Robert E. Lee, can offer us some clues in terms of how they may be going about doing that in their family, having to contend with a history that you know, is filled with contradictions, a history that I would imagine has a bit of shame and a bit of pride for some members of the family. How do you reconcile that?
That's the question at hand. That's the question at hand. All right, let's move on here, as the news industry is mourning today as trailblazing news correspondent Gail Christian has died at the age of 83. Christian was a pioneering news correspondent who is noted for helping pave the way for black women in the field. She made a name for herself for her on-air work while at NBC News and PBS. She gained national attention back in 1974 for her coverage of the trial of the Symbionese Liberation Army and the kidnapping of Patty Hearst, Christian's partner, shared to the New York Times that the cause of her death was due to complications from a recent surgery.
We stand on the shoulders of giants.
We really do.
I mean, wow. I mean, this is somebody that, has had quite a career, particularly with PBS. Particularly as a Black queer journalist, is a source of inspiration for a lot of us.
Absolutely. And, for a lot of journalists listening in, watching in, it's a discover, especially as, she's exposed, unfortunately, by way of her passing. But, there is some exposure to, younger generations who need to know who belongs to the fabric, and to the landscape and to the foundation upon which we step upon and continue to soar upon, if you will. So it's an unfortunate passing. It sounded kind of like sudden and unexpected, and our prayers out to her partner and her family. But as journalists, my plan is to continue to live in that legacy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Coming up, NBA legend Jalen Rose is firing back at former Lakers coach Phil Jackson.
Oh, yes. We'll tell you why Rose felt as though he needed to address the coach when we return. You're watching FOXSOUL's Black Report. That's a Detroit boy right there. Watch it. Watch it. And we want to welcome you back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. Singer and actor Tyrese Gibson has been ordered by a judge to pay over $500,000 in child support and legal fees.
That's right. This all comes after his ex-wife, Samantha Lee, says he refused to pay the originally ordered $10,000 a month. The ruling was made by the same judge who Tyrese previously called racist during the trial.
Yeah, we just talked about this yesterday. Now, Tyrese says he didn't pay Samantha the initial money because he felt she didn't need that much, as she made good money on her own. At last check, Samantha Lee is a licensed clinical social worker. I told you yesterday, Nick Quarterline.
Come on, Tyrese.
Listen, I said, hey, I love Tyrese. I love him. But, his credibility over the years, especially with this particular ongoing battle, has been a little shaky. And so what he was putting out there, talking about the judge called, and out her neck, I was like, hold on. We got to get the facts. And here today, we have more.
Not a good idea to pick a fight with the judge right before, they render a decision on your case. And by the way, what clinical social worker makes good money?
Right. And I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, I read he was actually held in contempt. I don't know if he was, if they kept him, but the judge put that gavel down. So, ain't no telling what Tyrese got to talking about in that courtroom that kind of PO'd that judge. And now he's paying even more than he was initially told to pay in the first place.
Yeah, and it's not up to him to decide, how much money he thinks his ex-wife should get. That's not how the law
works.
No, that's
not how it works.
Right?
That's not how it works. And this is not to refute or take away some of the legit arguments that dads do have when they go into court, and it's a child support thing, and sometimes that mama is a mess. We're not taking anything away from that. But Tyrese?
Well, some of the mamas listening are saying sometimes that daddy's a mess.
Yeah, this is true.
Just saying.
True. I think it goes both ways.
I think so.
For sure.
Soulja Boy is going to have to pay up also after a judge ruled that he owes his ex over $230,000.
Whoa.
His ex, Kayla Mayers, accused the rapper of assaulting her with a gun and kidnapping her in 2019. Last week, the jury in the case awarded Myers with $1,800 for mental health costs and another $234,000 for physical and mental pain and suffering. She was able to prove her injuries by text messages and DMs from Soulja Boy. Court documents also state that the judge found Soulja Boy engaged in malice, oppression, and fraud.
Yeah.
Say it ain't so.
But how you go from all of this? I mean, the whole entire world was to, some of what we've been hearing over the years. And I don't know if it's like if it's a mental thing, emotional thing. I don't know. But he hit so big, so quick, so fast. I don't know if he was so young. Maybe he didn't handle it. Maybe the village, didn't handle him properly. I don't know, but some of what we've been hearing about Soulja Boy as of late has been a bit disturbing.
And sometimes there's a maturity gap. I mean, take Soulja Boy out of it. You know, anybody that experiences, you know, success that seems to happen all very quickly, right? They may not always be prepared for that, right? And they may not always have the maturity to meet the moment. And so I don't know Soulja Boy personally, and so I can't really speak to that directly, but there are a lot of young guys out there, you know, who get caught up in cases like this because they're not ready. They're not mature enough to be able to handle that kind of responsibility, to handle that kind of money, to know what is nice to have and what is a must-have, let alone, you know, show up and you know, be the kind of person your family needs you to be.
I will give you that. However, what is the reason that comes about, like at age 7 when they say you know better? So he was what, late teens when he hit? I'm sure he was much older when he, violated this young lady, if you will. So you just know right from wrong. A maturity gap or not, you know you don't cause no bodily harm to anybody, especially somebody you say you care about, your girlfriend, a partner, whatever the case may be. So I hear you on that, but I still feel like, you know, no excuse. Come on, Soulja Boy, you know better. I don't care how immature you may act or appear to be. You know you don't put your hands on anybody like that, especially in the manner, or period, but in the manner in which he did, that sounds very malicious and with intent. You know better.
But we don't know, you know, what example Soulja Boy might have seen in his life that suggests that some of his choices and behavior are okay. And so again, don't know him, right? But, you know a lot of brothers out there, you know, that have a little bit of a maturity gap, you know, when it comes to, you know, being the man or the person that your family needs you to be, you know, versus, you know, playing these games. And so,
all right.
Just saying.
But you should know right from wrong. NBA legend Jalen Rose is firing back at Phil Jackson, legendary coach here, following some controversial comments while a recent comment, former NBA coach Phil Jackson said, this is what he said. He said he hasn't enjoyed watching games since the league started to have social justice initiatives on the court, specifically the Black Lives Matter sign that was written on the court during the 2020 playoffs. And you remember the players wore the slogans on their jerseys as well. Now, Jalen Rose clapped back, saying that Jackson made his entire career off the backs of black players. And if he doesn't like the platform, then he should stop watching the game.
Well, let me tell you, Jalen dropped that mic. He dropped that mic.
Jalen said, he often does.
Jalen said the quiet part out loud.
He did.
You know, because you know, like you can't start the clock at when players started protesting racial injustice following the murder of George Floyd, right? This has been a part of the history of America. When these players leave the court and they go back home, you know, whether it's where they live or it's where they spend the holidays or where they grew up, you know, there are folks that are counting on them in the spirit of Harry Belafonte to use your platform to say something, to do something, to make it stop. And the fact that Phil Jackson doesn't seem to quite understand that, you know, given how many you know, black, you know, iconic players he's worked with over the course of his career, right, is dumbfounded.
Yeah, and back to Jalen's point, on the backs, and you have a coach whose career is stellar, and the teams that he coached for, stellar, going from Chicago, the MJ days, to LA, and all the sports buffs out here, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that was the Kobe, you know, Shaq years and some beyond. For him to say that, what would his career be without, you know, those two type of organizations with those type of, like you said, iconic, legendary players? Come on, Phil. He should know better than that.
Come on, Phil.
At least don't say it out loud. Say it at home on the back patio or on vacation on a yacht somewhere, because he made plenty of money too.
But you know what, Courtney, if this can be a teachable moment for Phil, then maybe this can be a teachable moment for a lot of the Phils of his generation.
If he wants it to be a teachable moment. I don't know if he cares enough, because that's why he felt comfortable saying it.
Let us pray. The Houston Rockets have a new head coach. The team has hired Ime Udoka in the new role. Udoka led the Celtics to the 2022 NBA Finals in his only season as head coach. He was suspended from the Celtics this season for having a relationship with a coworker that led to his high-profile split from actress Nia Long. Sports analyst and former Rockets coach Jeff Van Gundy says he's a talented coach with a lot of experience.
He's a very talented coach and a proven coach. He's a great coach. And, you have to, obviously the Houston Rockets organization has been able to separate some of his, his personal life from what he has, or how he has proven himself, on the court as a head coach and the leader, of a squad. And so, if he has paid the piper in Boston and he is freed up to now do his thing in Houston, however, I want him to be careful because there's some baddies in Houston now. Some gorgeous, gorgeous women in Houston. I want you to stay focused, coach, and do your thing as that team could use some new hardware, rings and things of that nature. But Houston's a great place, especially for the culture.
Houston is a good place, but it's important to also note that both things can be true, right? Behind the scenes, he could be a work in progress, right? And he could be an amazing coach, right?
Yeah,
and so it doesn't have to be
absolutely.
one or the other. And I feel like sometimes, I think people may hyper-focus on the Nia Long years and what went wrong at the expense of looking at what he's doing right as a coach.
All I'm saying is, if he has, put that to rest and been forgiven or has asked for forgiveness from those involved and has moved on from Boston and now this is a new, fresh start, I just want old boy to stay focused and let's see what he's going to do with the Rockets because he did an awesome job with the Celtics and the rest is yet to be told and written.
Well, he had awesome taste with Nia Long. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and he is awesomely fine, too. All right, up next, it's the best part of the show. We call it Black Excellence.
That's right. We'll introduce you to the New Orleans high school senior who's breaking records before even accepting a college to attend.
Yep.
You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Fox Soul's Black Report. Well, New Orleans high school senior receives a record-breaking $9 million in scholarships and 170 college offers.
Man, that's nuts. 16-year-old Dennis Barnes applied to 200 colleges. Offers and scholarships are still coming in. He plans to announce his decision May 2nd and would still like to reach the goal of $10 million in scholarships. Dennis has always excelled in academia, having been promoted both to the 10th and then the 11th grade. So he skipped a few grades and all the while maintaining a GPA of 4.98. while holding leadership positions in the National Honor Society.
The number of offers that Dennis received breaks the previous record documented in the Guinness Book of World Records. He graduates on May 24th and plans on pursuing, get this, a dual undergraduate degree in computer science and criminal justice.
And I was reading. He's fluent in Spanish, and he's a head of some kind of Hispanic organization that promotes bilingualism. I mean, he is running it already, and just to have these choices at his fingertips, interesting. It'll be interesting to see, where he chooses to go, because he's been accepted to some of the top of the top of the top. So
yeah, I mean, with a 4.98 grade point average, you can go
consistent throughout his years.
Go anywhere and run the yard. And it's beautiful seeing all the honors cords. You see all the honors cords. I don't think I've ever seen anybody wearing that many honors cords.
He was promoted, through the 10th and the 11th grade. So I don't know if that means he went straight from 9th grade to the 12th grade, but he's been on this incredibly intelligent fast track for a moment. So, and he's also has been gaining college credits. So he'll walk into college probably as a sophomore or a junior because he's been able to study as a college kid alongside of his our National Honor Society studies in high school. That's amazing to me. I was a lazy student. I probably could have came out of high school with a 3-point. I was artsy fartsy. I wanted to sing and do cartwheels and be the hall guard captain. And I came out with like a 2.5, but it was enough to, couple that with my ACT and and squeeze my way into Michigan State University. But that's amazing, you know, these young people, especially what you're faced against sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly remember, you know, being a part of the National Honor Society and all of that.
You're one of those,
you know. But you know what's interesting? Even though I took AP classes and honors classes, I remember meeting a recruiter at a college fair, a University of Southern California recruiter, who looked at my grades and my profile and was like, this may be a stretch for you.
Ooh.
I'll never forget it, right?
Ooh.
And so, you know, I thought, well, you know, maybe it's not for me, right? Applied anyway and got in and ended up going.
Little discrimination going on there.
And so I don't know what was up with that recruiter at USC.
The only thing close to it.
But I'm glad I didn't listen to her.
The only thing close to like a promotion or anything honorary-ish in kindergarten, I did get a little certificate, said I was reading on the 3rd grade level.
Hey, and look at you now.
Still reading on the 3rd grade level because I'll jack up a word.
And look at you now.
Y'all know. All right,
but you know what? I also just want to say real quick. You know, so this month is National Autism Awareness Month, right? Since we're talking about school and everything, and I'm thinking about my cousin Einstein, who's autistic, and I'm sure that there are a number of folks in our families that are part of our soulmates that are also autistic, and I think it's just important to shine a light on how far we've come in terms of reducing the stigma around autism and providing, you know, autistic kids with the tips, tools, and resources that they need to persevere. We just had Ariva Martin on the show just yesterday. She is president of the Special Needs Network in Los Angeles. She has a kid that's autistic, and she has been a terrific, outspoken advocate on all issues related to folks with autism. And so we can't let this month of April go by without taking a moment to just shine a light on all of our autistic soulmates out there.
Yeah, and also before we wrap up, make sure you continue to tap in with the Amaud Arbery Foundation. They're having a 5K run in honor of him and his memory as that movement continues. You know, it just doesn't stop just because, you know, you don't see it or hear it in the headlines anymore. So definitely tap into that as well, soulmates. And you can tap in for a full rundown on today's stories and more. You can access Fox Soul's video on demand on any of our partners. You can even access past shows and other Black-centered content. And don't forget to download the Fox Soul app. It is free. And as always, it has absolutely been our pleasure to bring you this conversation today. We so appreciate you. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. On behalf of the entire team here at Fox Soul's Black Report, stay lifted.
And stay safe. We shall see you soon. Bye now.